Stanford University.
Okay, well, welcome to lecture number 15 of CS193P, and today is going to be, hopefully, a short amount of lecture time and a good long demo. This whole week, I've tried to pick topics for the lecture and the demo that will probably help you with your final project. Okay, so these are going to be common features that you're going to want to use in your final project. Let me, sorry, get my slides up here. And so my demo is a little bit of a grab bag because of that, but hopefully it will be helpful to you. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. So here's the four things I'm going to talk about today. Modal view controllers. A lot of you have been seeing that when you segue, and one of the choices is modal, and you're like, what's that? So we're going to find out what that is today, and when we should use it and when we shouldn't. Text fields and text views. A lot of you in your final projects want to get a little bit of text input from users, and we're going to talk about that also, when you should do that, when you shouldn't, because you have to be careful with that. This is a phone, after all, often. The UI view animation, this is kind of fun thing to add in your final project, where if you've got things changing on the screen, instead of just moving around or transitioning with segues and having abrupt, you can kind of move smoothly and cause things sliding in and out and all that stuff. You see that a lot in iPhone apps and iPad apps, and it really makes for a better user experience. It kind of keeps them grounded. Instead of things jumping in front of them, things are moving smoothly. So we'll talk about how to do this. Surprisingly easy to do. And then we'll also talk about NS Timer, and hopefully I'll have a chance to demo all of this. It's going to be tight, and if I run out of time, depending on how far I get, I'll either just post the extra stuff that I would have done, or we can continue it on Thursday, since both lectures are miscellaneous topics like this. All right, so let's talk about modal view controller. So you know a lot of ways to get a new view controller on the screen, like it's in a navigation controller and you push, right? Or it's in a split view controller and you either replace the right-hand side entirely, or you update it, or whatever. Or you have but sometimes what you want to do is put a view controller on screen, and you don't really want your application to be able to continue until someone answers the question that the modal view controller asks. And so that's what we mean by modal view controller. It's in a mode where the user has to do something before you can continue. So I have a couple of slightly animated images here, and so you're going to watch this. Maybe I'll run through it twice, but on the left, you can see this is the alarm clock app, right? The clock app. And here we're on the alarm page, and we're going to add a new alarm. Okay, so you see I press plus, a new view controller comes up, I canceled it, and it goes back away. But when it came up, that's when I had to set the alarm. If I hit cancel, I don't get a new alarm, but I do all the rest of the stuff and hit OK and go back. I noticed that, well, I'll do this again, but you'll notice that all the tabs were covered. So when that thing came up, I couldn't go on another tab or do anything else in the app except for set up my alarm. And then on the right here is text messages apps, like SMS app type app. And here I'm going to compose. So I click on compose, a new view controller comes up, and here I clicked plus and got yet another modal view controller. So these modal view controllers can then bring up more modal view controllers. Okay, so here I'm going to do this again, so you can see this. Okay, so on the left, see I'm hitting plus, brings it up to add an alarm, and then I'm canceling it, and then on the right, I'm hitting compose, and then I'm hitting plus to go look in my address book. Now I'm canceling it and canceling to go back. Okay, so modal things can be nested as well. I'm going to say right off the bat with modal view controllers, they can be abused. Okay, and here's how they get abused. You can't think of an interesting way to ask the user something or put something on screen, so you just put up a modal view controller and force them to answer the question right now. Whereas maybe what would have been nicer is if you put some views in the view controller that's up that they can swipe on or do a gesture or tap on or something like that to give you the input without locking up the app. So modal view controllers are somewhat disconcerting to the user because it locks their app up. Doesn't lock their phone up because they can always hit the home button and go to another app, which they might do if you keep locking them up in your app. Because a lot of times, you put a modal view controller up, and people are like, actually, I don't want to do this. I want to go to this other tab. And then they got to figure out how to cancel it and back up. And especially if you go modal inside modal, they're like backing up, canceling and going up. So be careful with modal view controllers. It can be an abused way to be putting view controllers on screen all the time. Question?
Will they always come up from the bottom like
Very good question. The question is, do modal view controllers always slide up from the bottom? And the answer is definitely not. And I'm going to show you today other ways to have the modal view controllers come up. So how do you make your modal view controller come on screen? And you do it with segues. Okay, you control drag from a button or a bar button item or whatever that causes the modal view controller to come up. So in the two examples I showed you before, they were little bar button items, compose and add contact or whatever, or the little add contact button in the compose window. And you click that and control drag in Xcode to create a segue and then set it to be a modal one. And then inside there, when you inspect that segue, that's where you can set things like how is this going to come up? Okay, is it just going to always slide up from the bottom, or what's it going to do? So we'll look at what some of those styles are in a minute here. You can put a modal view controller up from code. Okay, the way you do that is you create your view controller scene in Xcode like you're used to, but instead of control dragging to it, you just name that view controller scene. Remember that all view controllers have an identifier field. We haven't used it much in this course, but they do have a field. And so then you can create the view controller here. I'm doing it, this is kind of a bad example here. I'm doing alloc init, but you could also create the view controller by doing self.storyboard instantiate view controller with identifier. And then once you have the thing you want to present, you just call this method self. That should not be a dot. Self present, this is a terrible slide. I'll have to fix this later. Self space present modal view controller, the view controller you want to present. Animated, yes, you would probably always have it be animated in the modal case. And then there's got a completion block, and that completion block is just called when the modal view controller is finished its animation and it's on screen. Okay, you don't usually need to do much at that point because your view has been covered by this modal view, and you're kind of sitting there waiting for it to finish, but you could do something there. And so calling present modal view controller or segueing to it, the screen is going to be completely filled by this modal view controller that you've presented, and your view controller can't do anything. It has no access to the screen. Yeah.
Having the block similar to prepare for segue?
The question is having the block here like prepare for segue, and the answer is no. Okay. You still are going to do prepare for segue if you are using segues to put up modal view controllers, okay? A modal view controller is like any other segue when you use control dragging. Before, it's going to create the thing. And before it sets the outlets, unfortunately, it's going to call prepare view controller on the thing that's putting it up, and you'll get a chance to do your work. Here, you would probably set this thing up before you call present view controller, because here you're not going to get prepare for segue call, because this is not a segue, okay? You're directly putting it on screen. Is that the same question you had?
No, I was going to ask why it was a block if that's going to happen in the main thread.
Why is this a block is the question, this completion thing. And the answer for that is this is going to happen asynchronously, okay? Because this present modal view controller is going to return. The modal view controller doesn't block the main thread, right? It just puts the view controller on screen. It's just like if you push in a navigation controller, it puts the new one on there. Everything is still running. So this is going to return immediately. And then in the way the mechanism works, it's going to put the view controller on screen. And when it's done doing that, it'll call this block asynchronously.
Oh, that's when it returns off the screen.
Yeah. No. This is not, sorry. This is not when it returns. This is when it's up, when it's finished presenting it, putting it on screen, not when it's gone away.
Doesn't that happen in the main thread there because it's UI while it's sliding up on the main screen?
So the question is, doesn't that presentation happen in the main thread? Well, yeah, but the animation part of it, the sliding up, that happens in another thread. Okay, all this animation business, and we're going to see that today because I'm going to talk about view animation, that's all happening in a different thread. Okay, all animation on screen, whether it's things sliding in, buttons sliding over, what moving around, that's all happening in a different thread. Okay, let's wait till we get to animation. You'll see how that works. What's happening in the main thread and what's happening in that animation thread. Okay. So when does it all end, right? You put this modal view controller up, and now your application is sitting there, can't do anything except for whatever the modal view controller wants to do. When does it end? Well, it ends when the presenting view controller says dismiss modal view controller animated. Okay? That dismisses the last modal view controller it presented. So there were problems in previous versions. People were misusing this in previous versions of iOS. It wasn't a problem in iOS per se, but they were sending dismiss modal view controller animated to the presented view controller, and that is wrong. Okay? Don't ever send dismiss view controller animated to the presented view controller, the thing that's up modally, okay? It's the thing that presents, it's the thing that puts it up. That's the thing that has to be asked to dismiss it, okay? And obviously these things all need to be paired. Every time you present one, that one has to be dismissed, you see? And if you go down another level, then the presenter would then probably become the modal one, right? And so it's the presenter is the guy who calls present view controller, or it's the thing that segued, right? The view controller that segued. That's the thing that has to dismiss. Now, can modal view controllers dismiss themselves in any way? And actually they can, because they have a method, all view controllers have a method on themselves called presenting view controller. And that will be non-nil if you're a modal view controller and someone has presented you, okay? So you could say, get my presenting view controller and tell it to dismiss me. Now, this is generally frowned upon. Okay, why is this frowned upon? The answer is, presumably you're putting that modal view controller up to get some information from the user or something like that, and usually the guy who presents you wants to know what happened, okay? So usually you're going to use a delegate from your modal view controller to tell the guy who presented you, here's what happened. He's going to set himself as your delegate, and you're going to tell the delegate. However, sometimes you just hit cancel. Someone puts up the modal view controller to get an address from the address book or something, and the user says, cancel, and they just cancel. And so there's really nothing to communicate back. Even in that case, you might want to have a delegate method, user did cancel address lookup, okay? But it's a matter of programming style. Some people would say it's okay in that case just to ask the presenting view controller to dismiss you without doing any delegate stuff. Okay, so it's a little bit of a matter of style. It's probably okay in the cancel case, if your modal view controller just did nothing, all right? But if your modal view controller does something, then you need to tell it what happened, and you need to tell that using delegation. Just delegation, just like you know how to do. You're going to have to make your own delegate method. We'll show that in the demo. So here's an example of doing delegation. So here, this is a modal view controller that's coming on screen from a segue, and the segue identifier is lookup address. I get the address lookup view controller, which is the thing being presented, and then I set it up. I send it some messages to maybe set who the user is, whose address book we want to look in, or whatever. And then notice I say address view controller dot delegate equals self. So I'm setting myself as the delegate. This is in prepare for segue. Okay, the segue goes on and happens. The address guy, blah, blah, blah. Someone chooses something. They click OK. Then this other message, which address lookup view controller invented, its delegate method, sends address lookup view controller did select addressed, sends this back to me. And I do something with that address. Okay, I put that thing up for a reason. Now I do something with it, and then I dismiss it. Okay? This is where the dismiss happens if it's not the cancel case. Okay? Notice this is back to being the presenter. I don't know why I have so many dots in there. It's self-space, dismiss modal view controller animated. Okay? This is where I dismiss this. Does that make sense? So this is this presenting view controller. Got called back in the delegate. Now he's dismissing. All right? So this is the most common way to do this. So how does the modal view controller appear on screen? You've seen it slide up from the bottom, and, but there are other ways to do it. Okay? There's a way where the view controller that's doing the presenting can actually be like on a piece of paper on top of the one that's going to be modal and curl up. Okay? And so you see this kind of partially curled up page that is the presenter, and then underneath you see the modal one. Now you can only see the bottom 2/3 of it because of the curl. So that's one way. Another way is flip. Okay, so the presenter and the presentee, the presenter and the modal view controller flip over. Okay, another one is dissolve. They cross dissolve. One dissolves into the other. Okay, so you can imagine what these looks like. We'll try in the demo if we have time to show you what some of these looks like. Now on the iPad, there's another consideration, which is, okay, on the iPhone, the modal view controller always covers the entire screen. Okay, whether it slides up from the bottom or it's a curl or whatever, the whole screen is going to be used. But on the iPad, that's not necessary. Okay, and some things might look bad to be full screen. Some modal view controllers might want to be in a smaller space. And so there's two smaller spaces. One is the page sheet, and that means it's always the width of portrait mode, even if it's landscape. And so they'll just be kind of grayed out space on either side. So if you have something that always looks good, the width of portrait, and of course the keyboard's going to come up and obscure the bottom half too, that's that one. And then form sheet is even smaller. So even in portrait mode, it doesn't use the whole space. So it's kind of like a little card. So if you had a really small little screen, because you know, you'll see today in the demo, all our Modal View Controller does is ask a question and get an answer. It just has two fields, a label and a text field. It kind of looks cavernous, right? Kind of looks huge and a lot of open space in gigantic full screen presentation. So it might want to be in smaller presentation. So there's two things here. There's transition style, that's whether it curls or dissolves or flips, and then there's presentation style, which is really only for the iPad, which is whether it's the page sheet or the form sheet or the full thing. Notice there's also current context here. If you had a view controller that was currently sitting in a popover and it presented something modally, okay, it presented a modal view controller, current context would mean that it would be inside that popover. So, right, so it would cover the entire popover. Does that make sense? So it's, in other words, in the current context of the presenter, that's the context used to present the modal one. So that's what that one is. Okay, so that's it for modal view controllers. I'm going to demo it so you'll see how it all works. If you're comfortable with delegation, you're going to find modal view controllers really easy. Question?
What would be the difference if you just had like a regular navigation controller between pushing something on and having the back button, or pushing a modal view controller on and having a cancel button?
Okay, excellent question. So the question is, how would I decide, I'm in a navigation controller, how would I decide whether I just want to push something on and then have the back button, or whether I want to go modal and have like a cancel button or something to go back? And I think the answer is that if you're in a navigation controller, you almost always want to push. It's just more comfortable for the user to have the push and the back. They just feel like the thing they just left is more accessible to get back on. Also, there's a little bit of an issue of if you push and the thing that you push to, that question has to be answered or you can't go back, then it might be better to go modal. Okay? Because then the user might hit back and now you have to put them an alert. You can't go back now because I need the answer. You see, that would be bad. So that's when you would use modal. Does that make sense? All right, so that's it for modal view controller. Text field, UI text field, very similar to UI label. And you might ask, why haven't we covered text field so far? Text field's so useful. A user can type in text. That's great. But the thing is, on a phone, it's really not that useful. Okay, have you tried typing in text on a phone? I mean, some of you have great thumbs and you're used to text messaging, so it's, woo, no problem, text, give it to. But most people, it's kind of like, shift, number pad. It's just really painful. And so you want to design your applications as much as possible to not make them type in text. Okay, so sometimes that means give them a bunch of choices in a table view instead, if you can, or at least remember their common answers and then offer that in a table view, or something. Do whatever you can on the phone to do that. Now on the iPad, it's not so bad because actually in landscape mode, that iPad keyboard is, you know, not that much smaller than a standard keyboard. It's still a little awkward to type on, but it's a little different on iPad. So text field, not such a kind of a avoid it as it is on the iPhone. The keyboard. So the keyboard, a lot of people are like, oh, how do I put that keyboard up? I want to call a keyboard put on screen. No, it doesn't work that way, okay? The way the keyboard comes up is when a text field or a text view becomes the first responder, what's called first responders. First responder just means the little blinking text caret is in that view. And when the user types on the keyboard, characters are going to go to that blinking caret. So when any text field or text view becomes the first responder and its blinking cursor starts blinking, the keyboard will come up. Okay? Question?
When you click the button that says put the keyboard away,
yeah.
Is it no longer the first responder?
So the question is, when I click that little button in the right-hand corner of a keyboard that says put this keyboard away, does that mean nobody's the first responder? And the answer is that's exactly what that means. Okay? When you click that, whoever is the first responder gets sent resign first responder. It stops being the first responder. That's exactly what that means. Okay? You can also force the keyboard to go away in code by sending resign first responder to whatever the thing is that blinking caret. So basically, if that blinking caret goes away, the keyboard goes away. Keyboard is only going to be there when the blinking caret is in some view. Now, some people will say, what if the view is not visible? Then the keyboard's still there, okay, whether the view is visible or not. It's probably not great UI to have a blinking caret that's off screen that no one can see. but it would still bring the keyboard up. Question? I'm going to talk about it. So the question is, what's the difference between text field and text view? I'm going to talk about that. So you got a text field, okay, which is editing, and the person hits the return key, let's say, in the keyboard, or they dismiss the keyboard, okay, and it stops being first responder. How do you get the text out of it? Now, you can actually get the text out of the text field as the person's typing every character. There are delegate methods for that. And in general, the way you get the text out of a text field is using its delegate. So text field has a delegate. You almost 100% of the time that you use a text field, you're going to set its delegate. And the delegate's the one who's going to extract the text. Now, there are two methods that are really mainstream methods here. There's quite a few methods in text fields, text delegate. And don't have time to go over all of them, so check the doc. But there's two really important. One is text field did end editing. That is sent to the delegate when that caret goes away. Okay? So the person made the keyboard go away, or they hit the return key, and this other method allowed the return to happen. That's what happened. And that's usually when you extract the text and go do something with it. Okay? This other one, text field should returns a Boolean, which is whether it's okay to hit the return key right now. So this allows you to do a little bit of validation of what's in the text field. Okay? Notice that all these things, the text field gets passed to you as an argument, so you can look in the text field, and it has a property called text. You can get the text out of it, look at it, make a decision what you want to do, even modify the text. It's allowed, and then you move on from there. Question?
So sometimes you're filling the form, and there's this next button. So which method is called when you press next?
So the question is, sometimes you're filling out a form and maybe there's a button on the screen that says next, like go to the next thing. That next button is going to call resign first responder on that text field, and then this method is going to get called, text did end editing, okay, because it's going to resigning first responder. Other question? No. Okay. So the keyboard, like I say, appears when the caret appears. You can control the appearance of the keyboard because text field implements this protocol called the UI text input traits protocol. Okay, so does text view. And so you send these things like, do you want auto capitalization happening in the keyboard? What do you want the return key to say? Do you want it to say return, or do you want it to say go or search? You can even make it say Google, I think, done, other things like that. Do you want the text entry to be secure? In other words, you want star, 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 because it's a password or something like that. That's all controlled by this UI text input traits protocol. So these are all properties on UI text field, or in UI text view, which I'm going to talk about in a second. One thing to notice is that the keyboard comes up from the bottom and it covers up views. Okay? It doesn't like shrink them up or move them out of the way. It covers them up. It is your responsibility to make sure that the text field that got the caret, that caused the keyboard to come up, is going to still be visible when the keyboard is done sliding in. Okay, now how do you do that? Remember we talked about NS Notification Center. You have to sign up to get these notifications. UI keyboard will show notification, UI keyboard did hide notification, etc. And for example, you might have to scroll your view up, or you might have to change the frame of your view so that your text field will still be visible. Now, table view controller, for example, automatically does this for you. So if you have a UI table view cell that has an editable text field in it, right? You can just drag a UI text field into it. If someone clicks in that to become editing, that row will scroll up to be visible when the keyboard comes up. So that's kind of a nice feature of UI table view controller. But if you're not in UI table view, you got to do it by responding to this. Or you can lay out your UI so that the fields they can click on that bring up the keyboard will never be obscured. That's another way to do it. Yeah?
Is there any way to see which views will be hidden by the keyboard when the keyboard comes up?
The question is there any way to see in advance which ones will be hidden, which views might be hidden by the keyboard coming up? And not really, you can't really visualize it. Remember that in iOS 5, I don't know if you guys know this, but this keyboard actually can be split and moved on screen. So really, the keyboard could be put to anywhere where your thing gets in the way. But in terms of how big the keyboard is at the bottom, again, you got to respond to this notification. This notification has an object in it, this user info, that will have a dictionary that tells you how big the keyboard is. how much it moves. So you have to respond to it, is the bottom line. You can't predefine, because the keyboard might change in the future. They might make the keys a little bigger or add some accessory view or something that makes it so now it's a little different. So you want to be responding to that on the fly dynamically as much as possible. So actually my previous suggestion to try and lay out your UI, maybe not so good. This is usually not an issue, by the way. It's not a big issue. A lot of times you'll have your text fields right at the top of your views. They don't even come close to getting covered up. Text field has a whole bunch of properties. You can go look at them. Maybe we'll get to use the one placeholder today, which is kind of a fun one. You basically set the placeholder, and it'll put that text in the text field grayed out until someone clicks on it and starts typing. So it's kind of be a little hint. It's got a bunch of other stuff. You can go look at that in the documentation. It also has a left and right accessory view. You've probably seen this. Sometimes it's a little search button. Sometimes it's a little X, click X to click. You've seen that in text fields. Little small accessory views on each side. You can control that. And the keyboard also has an accessory view. When the keyboard slides up, it can have a little view just along the top of it where you can put stuff in there. Be careful with that one, because when the keyboard splits, you have to be careful about make sure that still works, so that you're getting what you expect there. I'm not sure exactly what that does in that case. I don't recall, but you have to be careful of that case. Input accessory views on the keyboard is pretty, I would avoid them as a strategy unless it's just really the right thing. All right, so the question was, what's the difference between UI text view and UI text field? Well, UI text view is multi-line and scrollable, and editable, just like UI text field. It's more for a chunk of text, okay? Whereas text field is more like an editable label, someone's name, a line in an address. That text field is for very short pieces of information. When you hit return in a text field, usually that's going to resign first responder and go do something. When you hit return in a text view, it's going to go to the next line. Does that see? See the difference? So that's the difference of when you use them. All the font in a text view is the same. So if you want like bold and italics and things all mixed in it, then you're going to use a UI web view with HTML. Okay. The UI text view delegate is similar to the text field. You get notified when editing starts and ends and stuff changes. You can react to that. There's also a special scroll view method. A text view is a scroll view, and it adds this method scroll range to visible, which you specify an NS range of the characters, and it'll scroll them to visible, that kind of thing. So, UI text view rarely used. Rarely used. Okay. UI view animation. UI view animation works by allowing you to set certain properties of a UI view, only a certain of them, and then when you set them using the UI view animation mechanism, it sets them immediately, like the frame, or whether it's hidden or not, the transform, that's the scaling rotation of the thing, the opacity. It sets them right away, but it doesn't actually appear on screen except for over time, right? It gets animated on screen. So if you've got a view that's fully opaque and you set its opacity to 0, but you do it in an animation block that you say is 5 seconds long, then when you set it to 0, it will immediately become completely transparent. However, on screen, it'll take 5 seconds for it to fade out. Okay? So this can be quite confusing to people because they think, oh, I set the opacity, but 5-second animation, and the user did something in the middle of that 5 seconds, and I expected the animation to be 50% because it was only halfway done. Well, it doesn't work that way, okay? When you set things in an animation block, which you'll see in a second how you do that, it sets them immediately. It's only the visual effect that takes time. All right? That visual effect, as I said, happens in another thread. It doesn't block the main thread or anything like that. It's just happening in another thread. Question?
So will they be able to click on something that's going to come up next?
Great question. So can they, while it's animating, a button is moving or something, can they click on it or click on something else and then go to some other screen or whatever? Absolutely. You can. And you can also control whether the thing that is itself being animated, the view that's moving, whether it's allowed to be clicked on. So it is actually possible you could have a button moving across the screen and you can click on it halfway across and it will, either animate to somewhere else or do its target action or whatever. So that is all controllable. But remember that when you click on the button, its position is going to be its new position, the position you set it to, not the halfway across. Okay, your question?
Can you interact with elements if the opacity is 0?
Sorry?
Can you interact with elements if the opacity is 0?
So the question is, can you interact with elements, like gesture on them or something, if the opacity is 0, fully transparent? And the answer is no. Something that's fully transparent is like it's hidden, right? Can't be interacted with. How is this all done? This is done with a UI view class method and blocks. Okay, UI view class method, not an instance method on view, a class method. And so the way this works is you this method, this class method, takes a block, and inside that block, you can change the parameters of any views you want. Since this is a class method, it's not about an instance of a view. Any views you want, and all those changes will happen immediately, but then start to be animated over the duration. And this method also lets you specify what that duration is, if there's a little delay before you get started, and it also executes another block when it's done, when the animation has completed. Okay, so let's look at that, see what that code looks like. This is all built on top of Core Animation, by the way, which is a really powerful animation framework. If you were building a game or something like that, you might well be using Core Animation directly. Okay, and Core Animation is just a mechanism for changing properties and have them be animated over time. It's really quite amazing. But here we're just talking about the UI view level, which is a little simpler. So here's the method. There's a few methods. Some have fewer arguments, but they're all the basic thing. This is the main one. And you can see that it takes a duration. That's how long this animation is going to take. Delay, that's how long to wait before you start doing the animation. Okay, how long you wait from the time you call this method. Options, a whole bunch of options. We'll talk about that in a second. Animations is the block. Inside that block, you change a bunch of attributes of views. Okay, anything you want. And then completion. And the completion will tell you whether the animation was interrupted or whether it completed. Now, why would an animation get interrupted? Well, for example, if your view goes off screen, then your animations could get interrupted. If someone else comes along and sets the property to something else, then your animation could get interrupted. Okay? So usually you'll see how this works out with the interruptions, but a lot of times you might have an animation going and then you start another animation and you intentionally want it to interrupt the other one, and there's one of these many options is start this new animation from where the other one got interrupted. So you're moving a button, gets halfway across screen, you click another thing to make it move somewhere else, and it'll actually start moving from where it got interrupted. Okay, so even though you can't get the property of where that was when it got interrupted, the animation engine knows that now I'm going to start a new animation. I was halfway through an animation, wherever everything was, it starts from there and goes to the new place. Okay. So let's look at an example. So here's an example of changing the opacity, okay, the alpha of a view. So this code would cause this my view, okay, which is only referenced inside the blocks. You see, my view.alpha equals 0. So this would cause my view to fade out from full opacity, or whatever opacity it's at now, to 0 over 3 seconds. Okay? Now, if within the 3 seconds someone animated the alpha to non-0, then the finished would be false. So it wouldn't remove it from superview. Okay, so this would be a way to have a view fade out and then get removed from the view hierarchy. But if it starts to fade out and somebody else sets the alpha to non-0, then it wouldn't finish, and so it wouldn't get removed. Okay, we'll see that in the demo, which I don't know we're going to have much time to get that far, but maybe. Here I just want to emphasize this thing. So all I've changed here is that I've set the delay to 2.0, so I'm not going to start this animation for 2 seconds. Notice I just put an NSLog in there that says what the alpha is right after I call animate with duration, and it's going to be 0. Because that block, the animation block, gets executed immediately. It is not executed asynchronously, or it is executed immediately. Okay, now again, the visible appearance of it gets animated, but the actual changes happen immediately. So that would say alpha is 0. Question?
If you had like a ball sliding, when you tapped it, you wanted to interrupt the animation to change the direction of the slide. How could you get any information about where it was on the screen?
Okay, great question. So he says, yes, you have a ball sliding across the screen, and you tap it, and you want it to go back the other way. Okay, how do you get the information you need to know where the ball was so you can have it animating back the other way? And the answer is you don't. What you do is you make a new animation that says, make the ball go over here, right? You say ball frame dot origin equals 0, 0. And that new animation, if the old animation, the new animation, you would specify the option begin from current animation position. And so when that animation starts, it'll start wherever the ball is. You don't get the ball's location. The animation system is the only thing that can do that. Okay?
If you wanted to move like a 45-degree angle or something, you couldn't do that?
You could do that as well. You would just set the new position. At any time, you can issue a new animation that says, go over here. Nope, go over here. Nope, go over here. And as long as you set this, I think I have this here, yeah. As long as you set the one there, begin from current state, the very first option, it'll start from wherever it was when you issued the new animation.
But this new position couldn't be relative to where it was in the middle of the animation.
No.
Okay, remember, the animation, you don't specify old position, you only specify the new position. That's all you specify, okay? When you put that animate in there, inside the block, you specify the new position. You say frame equals whatever, okay? Now, where it starts from is either where it is now being animated, or if you don't do begin from current state, it's going to start from where dot frame is right now. Okay? So this is the confusion. I know it's hard to say in words. When you see it in code, maybe it'll make some sense. When you play with it, you'll start to say, oh, I see. But you got to get used to the fact that when you post an animation, it changes things immediately. Your ball is at the new position already. Okay? On screen, it's still moving over there because it's being animated, but it is at the new position. And unless you do this begin from current state and issue another animation, it's going to go all the way there. Now, if you set the frame to something else, it might jump. So you got to be careful there. If you want it to smoothly animate from position to position, you got to use animation all the time, right? You got to keep calling UI view animate all the time. All right, so what are some of the other things here? You can control things like whether this animation repeats, just keeps on going. You can control whether it goes in a linear fashion, in other words, immediately starts going off at a constant velocity and gets to its thing, or whether it eases in, starts off slow, picks up speed, gets to a constant velocity, and then slows down before it lands, okay? Which is a little smoother for the user than, no, it just starts moving, okay? And you can control other things if you're animating whole views being replaced in the view hierarchy, which you can animate, right? Add subview and remove from subview, you can animate that. And if you're doing that, then you can control whether it's curls, right? The views curl up, okay, or whether they flip, things like that. But if you are doing the add subview, remove subview, and you're animating changes to the view hierarchy, basically, then you want to use a little different method here, which is transition from view to view or transition with view. And the first one says, this from view is already in the view hierarchy. I want it to be taken out and to view to be put in, right? They'll each have their own frames. I want this swap to happen, basically. And so you don't have to specify an animation block. That's what you're animating, is the remove subview of from view and the add subview of to view. But you can still specify options like curl or dissolve or crossfade or whatever, and you still get a completion block. Transition with view says, I'm going to be modifying some subviews of myself, setting them to dot hidden or something else like that inside the animation block, and so please animate that. Okay, so again, even that could happen with a curl. Like you change 4 subviews from being hidden to not being hidden and 4 other ones to being hidden, and it could curl up and show you a new view that has the new 4 views and the old one's gone. Okay. All right, timer. So timer is super simple. You just call this method schedule timer with time interval. You give it the seconds, and that's either how many seconds from now it's going to do this once. Okay, call that selector on that target. Or if you have repeats yes, it's how many seconds it's going to between invoking that method. All right, so if you say time interval 3 and repeats yes, then every 3 seconds it's going to call that selector do something on that target self. User info is just any context information you want to pass along. It can be nil if you want. Okay, it's just for you to use. What does do something? Oh, sorry. This is not real-time programming here. Okay, this is just basically posting something on the main queue, think of it as posting a block on the main queue that's going to call that method. Okay? But it does it in this time interval. So it might not run exactly at the time you want. If the main queue is busy at the time it wants to run, it's not going to interrupt everything in the main queue and call this method. Okay? It's going to post it on there. So you have to be a little bit careful. A, you don't want to do a lot of heavy-duty work in this thing because you don't want to block the main queue. Okay? And B, you don't want to be calling this thing too often because that could essentially block the main queue. If you're calling it like once every 1,000 times a second or 100 times a second even, you're just going to be constantly distracting the main queue to go do this thing. So it's really not for that appropriate level of doing things, okay? It's more something you would call once every 10 seconds or once a minute or even 5 times a second or something, or a simple animation that might be as many as 10 frames per second. Okay? If you want real animation, you're building a game, a shoot 'em up game, animated, or you're shooting for things like 30 and 60 frames a second. You're not using NS Timer. Okay? You're using core animation, really low level, high speed animation. Yeah, so you can check the documentation for more, and you'll see something in the demo. We definitely want to invalidate timers when our view goes off screen. So if we have a timer that's doing something on screen, we don't want that running when our view's off screen. That's just a waste of resources, so we'd invalidate it. The method that gets called, do something, its only argument is the timer. So the timer gets handed back to you when do something gets called. And any object is a method in the timer, so you can get the any object back. Okay, so we have half an hour. I definitely am not going to get this all done in half an hour. So what I'll do as much as I can, and we can continue the rest on Thursday. So the app that I'm going to build, I'm calling Kitchen Sink. Okay, it's called Kitchen Sink because I'm throwing everything in here, trying to show you as many different things you might need for your final project as possible, not just today, but on Thursday. But today I'm going to do a modal view controller. That modal view controller is going to get text from the user. If I have time, which I probably won't, we'll do a little UI view animation, and then probably on Thursday we'll do a timer. So here's all the things to watch for, and here we go. Let's quit that. Actually, before I do that, I'm sorry. I'm going to show you the last slide of this just because I don't want to go back to this. So coming up on Thursday, more random topics. I already talked about the Friday section. You should check Piazza for that and find out the details of what's going on there. Should be a good one. Kind of like the Mike Gaffery talk we had last week. This is another similar industry talk. All right, so Xcode. So I'm going to create a new project here. I'm going to call it Kitchen Sink. You know, one thing I like to do when I create a project that has a space in the name is I like that the class prefix not have the space because I don't like kitchen underbar sink class names, right? So I'll just put kitchen sink. This is going to be universal, but I'm only going to do the iPad thing here because I have my little iPad demo machine here. I'll leave it as an exercise to you to get it working on the iPhone. What's this going to look like? Let's do some things here. Let's move some of this stuff out of my way here. Let's put that down there. So this is going to be a very simple app. I'm just going to have this view controller right here. I'm going to put a toolbar on it, and I'm going to have one button in the toolbar, and that toolbar button is going to say add a label, a UI label, to the blank space at the bottom of this view. Okay? And I can add as many of those labels as I want. So the blank space at the bottom of the view, this can be under the toolbar. I'm going to call that the kitchen sink because I'm going to throw all kinds of things in there in the next couple of lectures. And so that's it. So that's how it's going to modally ask for the text that you want that label to have. All right, so I'm going to click that button. It's going to put a modal view up. I'm going to type in the label text I want in the label. I'm going to, when I resign first responder, hit return or dismiss the keyboard. It's going to go back and create a label with that text on it in this open space. All right, so to do that, I obviously need to have a toolbar here. So let's go ahead and do that. Try to make the space here. So toolbar, I think, is at the very bottom. Yeah, there it is. Oops, sorry. Zoom in. Put our toolbar here. Let's see if I can manage these screen real estate I have. I know that's a challenge for you too. So we'll get up here. All right, so there's our toolbar at the top. I want the toolbar at the top, so let's make sure that I set the struts and springs to be at the top. I'm going to have the little item here say add label. I also need a view down here that's going to be my kitchen sink. It's just going to be a generic view. So I'm just going to drag out a generic view here. All right, let's resize it to fit the whole space. Oops, missed it. There we go. Sorry. There. Nope, I missed it again. All right, how about this? I can't see. This is a problem with my screen here. There we go. Oh, sorry. Okay, so let's demos here. And this is a challenge on a small screen. I know that. Okay.
Is there any way to zoom so you can see the whole?
I don't. The question is there any way to zoom so I can have this whole thing and not in my small screen here? And I don't think so. And I'm not sure why. There we go. Okay. I kept missing that. I don't think there's a way to do that, unfortunately. It's a lot of scrolling and zooming around. Anyway, so let's set the struts and springs of this guy too, so that it fits. Let's go ahead and create an outlet for this view. So I'm going to go like this. Here's our kitchen sink view controller. I'm going to make this be private. So I'm going to go @ interface. Actually, let's copy and paste. Save ourselves some typing here. All right, so I have a little private interface there. I'm just going to control drag. We'll call this the kitchen sink. All right, so it's just a blank UI view. I'm just going to use it to as a super view to throw all my UI labels and stuff in there. One thing I'm also going to do to that view, this is a good time to talk about this actually. There's an option in UI view, do you see it right here, called clip subviews? All right, if you turn that on, what that means is if I have a subview and it draws partially outside my bounds, do I clip it? All right, or do I just let it draw outside its bounds and spill over into what other view is behind? So here I'm going to clip subviews, and the reason for that is I don't want to add the extra code to make sure my UI labels are always staying in their bounds, and I don't want them to draw on top of my toolbar up here. So clip subviews has a performance cost because it's got to now clip everything, but it's certainly something you can use if you need it. Okay, so let's go the rest of our UI here. So we have this. Now we need another view controller. This is going to be our modal view controller. All right. So I'm going to go up here. I'm just dragging out a view controller. I'm going to create a file to be its class. You guys are hopefully all very familiar with this. I'm going to call this Asker view controller. Okay. The Asker view controller is just going to be a view controller that just asks a question and gets an answer. That's all it does. Okay. So got a good name, Asker view controller. Let's clean out all the junk in here. Not junk, quality template code. And we'll say yes. And public API for Asker view controller, I'm going to have a couple properties here. Actually, I'm going to make this copy. We'll talk about that. NS string question, and I'm going to have a property for the answer as well. Now, why am I making these copy as opposed to strong? And the answer is I don't want to give anyone using this API the idea that if they passed a mutable string in here for the question and then changed that mutable string later, that the question would change on the screen. Okay? So what I'm saying here is I'm making an immutable copy. So when you call me, that's the question, what the question's going to be. All right? So that's what's going on here. So let's synthesize those. We got the question. Oops, question, and we have the answer equals the answer. So that's just the question and the answer. Let's build our UI for this thing, right? So we have this, here's our modal view. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a label, which is the question, and a text field, which is the answer. So I'm just going to bring this, zoom, bring the label out here. Let's make the label bigger, maybe even 36 point or something like that. Let's make this wider. We'll use our blue lines. We don't need to be quite so tall. And I'm going to make it go all the way across the screen, and I'm going to set the struts and springs to do that. So let's go over here. I'll set my struts and springs, oops, width-wise. Okay, so this label is going to always be as wide as the screen. It's going to kind of maintain its distance from the top, which is, 309 pixels or whatever. Then I need a text field, so let's drag that out. That's this thing right here. Okay, you see text field? I'll just put that right under here. This is going to be the answer. Here, let's go ahead and put a question right here, just so we can know what this field is. Let's also make this one a little bigger. Let's go only 24 point here. And let's set its struts and springs. Let's go ahead and make it wider, scroll, and wider. Okay, I'm going to create a couple outlets for these two things. Again, hopefully this is something you're all, oh, whoops, one thing, let's make sure we do. Oh, great example, opportunity to show you another cool feature. So one thing is, you notice sometimes it's hard to, I want to select the view controller here, but I click and it's like I'm selecting the view and all that stuff. You know that, how difficult that can be. There's a little magic here. If you hold down Shift and right click, it'll give you all the things that are underneath the mouse. Okay, so if I like Shift right click here, I could select the text field or the view or the controller. I don't know if you guys blundered across that. So here I'm selecting the controller, and the reason I'm selecting the controller is I need to set its class to be Asker. Okay, that's why I wasn't able to do my outlet there. So let's go back to here. So now it's correctly got my Asker. I'm going to make these private as well. I like to copy and paste. It'd be nice if it had a way to just automatically do that right. So I'm just going to control drag here from my question. Call that question label. And I'm going to control drag from my text field also. Answer text field. And this would be a good opportunity, for example, to let's say when set question is called, why don't we update our question for instance variable and also say self.question label, oops, dot text equals question, that square bracket. Right? So that's a way to just kind of keep the UI. If someone sets a question, it's going to update the question in the UI. What else we got? So that's pretty much all I need there. Back in here, let's go ahead and make our segue, the modal segue. So very simple here. I'm just going to control drag from this button, control drag over to this thing. And instead of pushing or pop over replace, I'm going to do modal. And then if I inspect this segue, okay, here's where you can see things like the presentation style and the transition style, whether we're going to curl or cross dissolve or whatever. All right, so maybe we'll pick curl just to be fun. And we need a name. We'll call this create label curl or something like that. And really that's all we need to do to make this modal thing happen. So let's go ahead and do that and see what's going on here. And you'll see that, we got some work to do to make this modal thing really work. Okay, so here's our UI. It's our kitchen sink down at the bottom. And so I'm going to press this add label, and you can see it curled up. Do you see how the curl came up and showed our modal view underneath, which is kind of cool. Now, a little bit of a problem here, which is I can't get out of this. Okay? I can click on my text field. I got a keyboard, but if I hit return or get rid of the keyboard, it's like I can't get back. Okay? And why is that? Because we have not done dismiss modal view controller. Now, there's going to be two places we're going to dismiss this controller. One is in the case where the person doesn't answer the question and just dismisses the keyboard. That's like cancel. And we're just going to go back, not do the add label. And the other one is, someone types something and we're going to press return. And in that case, we're going to have to use a delegate to communicate that back, and then the delegate will dismiss it. Okay? Question?
Is there any way you can get it when you tap the top page? Or something like that, if I try to tap that, make it go down?
So the question is there any way I could do something where like I could tap on the top to make it go back? And in fact, it does do that to dismiss it. But again, that's almost like the thing dismissing itself. So if I had typed CS in there and hit that would nothing would happen. It'd be like hitting cancel. Does that make sense? So if that's the behavior you want, then you can do that. That's no problem. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to make this Asker view controller make its text field work. Okay, let's do that first. And once we get its text field working, then we can do the modal view controller stuff. So to make the text field work, we got to become the text field delegate. Okay? That's how all the text field stuff works. So how do I do that? I'm going to make some more space here. This is Asker view controller, right? We're in the Asker view controller here. I'm going to say that it is a UI text field delegate. Okay? Now, all the methods in UI text field delegate protocol are optional. So that's why it's not warning me, oh, you don't implement this protocol, because they're all optional. Okay? It's kind of an informal protocol. And but I do want to implement some of these ones. For example, one of the best ones I might want to do is text field did end editing. Okay? So this is called anytime the caret gets taken away from me. And what might I want to do here? Well, maybe I would want to say answer equals text field.text. Okay? Now, if the caret gets taken away from me and there's no text in myself, I'm going to take that as a message that I want to cancel. So I'm going to say if no text field dot text length, okay, so the text field is empty. Then I'm going to say self presenting view controller dismiss. Okay, else need to communicate. Okay, I need to tell somebody what the text is. All right, so if I just ran this right now, we'd have the advantage that if I clear the keyboard away when the text field is empty, it would make this modal view controller go away, which that's good. Okay, so that's nice. Oh, look at that. No. Okay, so what else can I do with the text field delegate? Well, let's try this one. Bool text field should return. You can see there's quite a few here, but this was return. So this is basically whether the return key is valid right now. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to say if the text field's text is non-zero, then I am going to have the text field resign first responder, and I'm going to return yes. Okay, so if you hit return key, it's going to get rid of the keyboard and call text field did end editing. Okay, because I'm going to take the caret away. That's what resign first responder does. Okay. Otherwise, I'm going to say no. Don't let the return key work. Okay, so I'm not going to let you hit return to enter nothing. Yeah.
Did you say that this modal view controller, if you call that with self-presenting view controller, that's bad style?
So the question is this bad style? Didn't I say that this was bad style? And I said that, you know, it's a matter of style. Okay. I'm showing you doing it this way because there are many people who would say this is perfectly reasonable because you're not communicating any information back, you're basically canceling. It's no different than tapping on the top to make it go away. So I'm showing it to you. You can decide yourself whether you want to do that or whether you want to use delegation, which we'll talk about in a moment as well. What else do we need to make this work? Well, we definitely need to do this. In view did load, we need to say self.answer text field delegate equals self. Right? If we don't do that, we're not going to get any of these text field messages. And this is a common mistake or a common thing that you guys will do when you're doing your final project. You'll be like, I'm setting the delegate, but you forget to set the actual delegate, and so none of these messages get sent. Okay? So that's something definitely to watch out for. Here's another cool thing we probably want to do with the text field is in view will appear. Okay? Super view will appear. We probably want to do this. Self.answer text field become first responder. Okay? So every time this view appears, that caret is going to start blinking in that text field. Instead of making the user touch it, that's kind of pain in the neck for them to have to do that extra step. Okay? So if you had multiple text fields, you'd have to decide which one do you want this to start out in. Right? So that makes sense. Okay, so we're a little short on time, so I'm going to keep going here. Normally I would run here, and we'd see that we could basically cancel by clicking, but I'm going to go ahead and do the delegation here. So let's do this part right here. Okay, we need to be able to communicate back when someone types something in that text field what the answer was. So to do that, we need a delegate. So I'm going to create here a delegate. Again, this should all be very, very comfortable for you guys. I'm going to call this the Asker View Controller Delegate Protocol. We'll go ahead and leave NS object in there. I'm going to say Asker View Controller Sender. I told you that I always like to That's usually pretty good style to always have the sender. Did ask question and got answer. Now, you might be saying, why do I even need to pass these two arguments along? Because I have this public API down here. Okay, I could just send a message to the delegate saying, okay, look at your answer now, look at the answer. But there's two things that this does that's nice here. Okay, one is it's very clearly saying what's happening in this delegate method. Okay, I asked a question and I got an answer. It's also just providing the information that is relevant to what happened right there to be used as arguments instead of making them go back and call the sender to get the question and answer. Again, a matter of style, perfectly reasonable kind of to do it either way. Some people would argue this is just extra verbosity, not really needed. That's not something where it's like, do it this way or else. And so now, of course, we need our delegate, which is an asker view controller delegate. All right, we need to go over here and synthesize it. Goes under bar delegate. And we need to use it. And so this is where the communicate happens. And we're just going to say self.delegate, asker view controller, self, did ask question, and got answer. Okay, so even in my internal implementation, I'm just calling question and answer. Okay, so that's this side of it. How about the other side of it, the side that wants to use this asker view controller? Well, so far, all that side has done is control dragged to make a segue. But how do we make a segue actually do something interesting? We prepare, right? We do prepare for segue. So let's do that. Let's clear this out. We will also return yes here. Let's make that look nicer. Let's even make it look even nicer by being correct. Like that. All right, so we do prepare for segue. So what are we going to do in prepare for segue here? Okay, we call that thing create label curl. And actually, I'm going to have a nice generic way to do here. I'm going to say if the segue's identifier, identifier has the prefix create label, then I'm going to do it. That way I can have different identifiers, maybe create label curl, create label dissolve. And one thing I will do when I post this code is I'll put some more buttons in the toolbar for you that do dissolve and all these other things. So you can just click on them and see what they do. Okay, instead of having to go and change the thing in the inspector, it'll just be a lot easier. You can just click curl, page, dissolve, page, form, and just see what they look like. So they'll each have their own segue identifier, but they'll all start with create label because that's what this is doing. So I'm just going to say here, let's go ahead and import asker view controller. And so I'm going to say asker view controller, asker equals asker view controller segue.destination view controller, right? That's the thing we're segueing to. Now, someone asked me a great question, which is, should I use introspection here? Right? Should I make sure that segue.destination controller is actually an asker view controller before I cast it and start using it? And that's a matter of style as well. Here's the pros and cons. If you don't do introspection, then your program will crash if you screw up and segue to the wrong thing. And that might be good because you can find that bug before you ship it on the App Store. Okay? If you do use introspection, then your program will be a lot more tolerant of a mistake. Right? It won't crash. It'll just put up a view controller that's unprepared. But that might be worse. Okay? So sometimes making it go ahead and crash is better. You'll find the bugs. So let's set the asker's question to what do you want your label to say? Right? So this is the asker. That's the question we want because we're trying to create a new label. And then most importantly, we want to say asker.delegate equals self. That's going to generate a warning. Why? Because we have to say that we are an asker view controller delegate. That's going to generate a warning. Why? Because this guy's method is not optional. Okay? So we have to go void asker view controller blah, blah, blah. Okay? And what do we want to do in here? Okay? So the user typed something in the view controller. We got the answer now. Now we want to create our label. So we're going to say self add label with the answer. Okay, so I need to create a method that adds a label with that particular string. And then most importantly, I'm going to do dismiss modal view controller Yes. Okay, animated. And notice this is self, not self-presenting view controller. I am the presenting view controller here. So that's why I'm saying self. And that's very common for the delegate to be the presenter. And so obviously I need add label. Ooh, look, I typed it really fast. Okay, so here's add label, right? It just creates a label, sets its text, okay, sets the font really big, sets the background clear so that if I have labels that overlap, they'll show through to each other. Sets a random location for the label. Okay, that just uses arc4 random, create a random location. And then adds it as a subview to the kitchen sink. All right, so let's see if this works. I'm kind of rushing here a little bit, but I want to show you as much as possible. All right, so here's our kitchen sink with the add label. So I'm going to hit the add label, and we get the curl. And so let's do our favorite label, which is CS193P, of course. All right, and hit return, and it worked. So let's add another label. How about, yeah, let's try that. Oh, the question not being set. Good, we'll go look at that. But let's also look at what happens if we don't set the question. So here I'm just going to hit return. Doesn't allow return because we said should return equals no, right? Remember that? Return. And then if I get rid of the keyboard, what do you think will happen? It'll go away and it won't add a label, right? Exactly what happens. So that's working. So yeah, question? No? All right, so we have a problem here though, that question right there is saying question. And so why is that? And probably that is the age-old problem with preparing for segues, which I'm sure you have had many times, and you'll have it on your final project because it's just easy to forget this. And I also think it could be improved in the design of iOS, which is in Prepare for Segue, none of your outlets are set. Okay? So that's not good. Now, luckily, we have question, which is a local, a property. So in our view did load, for example, we can just say self.questionLabel.text equals self.question. Okay, so that means if our question gets set before we get loaded, we'll update it. You know, another thing we could do here, by the way, which is kind of fun, is we could set our answer text field's placeholder to be answer. Okay, and then when we call it here, we could say asker.question equals a placeholder, kind of a prompting answer like, label text. Okay, now when we run, oh, sorry, answer. Ooh, you guys are good. See, you're getting used to fixing me on the fly here. It's good. Okay, so now when we add a label, we get our curl here. You can see that it says label text in there, kind of light gray, and we got our question being asked. And when we start to type, the little prompting text goes away. Okay? All right. Next thing I want to show is view animation. I think I can do it in 5 minutes, believe it or not. And what I'm going to do is we're going to have it so that when you tap on a label, it moves to some random location. That's why I have set random location for view called out like this. Okay, how do we do that? Well, I'm going to show you two things at once here. One, I'm going to show you how to add a tap gesture to a view in Xcode. Up till now, you've done it by saying UI, just tap gesture recognizer, alloc, init with target, blah, blah, blah. But you can actually do all that in Xcode. All right, and the way you do that is you go down to the object library here, and towards the bottom, you'll see a whole bunch of gestures. You see tap gesture, pinch gesture, all this stuff. All I need to do this is I take this tap gesture, so I have a view. So in this case, I'm going to add it to the kitchen sink, and just drag it on here. And it's not a UI element, so it's not going to appear on screen. The place you're going to find it is in this document outline. You see it right there? And then to set the gesture recognizer, the handler of the gesture recognizer, you just use control drag, just like you're setting a target action. So let's do that. We'll have that be here. I'm just holding down control and dragging. So we'll put it right there. It'd be really nice if this worked, which is if you pick this right here, if it would make something where the argument is a tap gesture recognizer, but that does not work. That appears to be a bug in Xcode. So I'm going to call this tap, and you can see that it didn't do it. I just put ID here, okay, ID sender. So I'm going to fix that, UI tap gesture recognizer star gesture. Okay, now this is just a gesture totally like you're used to, okay? This is the same gestures that you wrote way back in assignment 3 or whatever. So what are we going to do in this particular gesture recognizer? What I'm going to do, now I could have added gesture recognizer in code to each label that I added. But instead, I have one gesture recognizer that recognizes a tap in the kitchen sink, and I'm going to look in that tap, and every single label that's under that tap, I'm going to animate it. Okay? So here's how I do that. I'm just going to say for UI view in the kitchen sink subviews. Yes, I'm going to make this much wider. Okay, so I'm just going to go look through all the things. Let's find out where the tap was. You'll remember that is, oops, from previous demo. CG point, tap location, oops, location equals gesture, location in view, the kitchen sink. Oops, kitchen sink. Okay, so now we have the location, and I'm just going to say if CG rect, not CG rect make. That's the thing about the escape completion. If you hit tab and you didn't mean to, you're doing a lot of backspacing. All right, it contains point. There's a nice little CG rect contains point. And I'm going to say if the views frame contains the tap location, then I'm going to animate it. Okay? So now this is nothing up my sleeves. This is the animation. Very simple. UI view, animate with duration. I'm going to use the simple one, not with all the options and all that. Let's have it take, I don't know, 4 seconds to move to its new location. Here's the block of animations. Returns nothing, takes no arguments. Oops, but it does use a curly brace, not a parentheses. Okay, and what do we need to do in here to make this work? All we need to do is set the views frame. That is it. Okay, so I'm just going to do self set random. Oops, let's go ahead and put this up a little higher because it's private. Okay, I'm just going to say set random location for view, that view. Okay, and that's just going to set its center, which is essentially setting its frame. And that's all I need to do. Okay, so let's see if this works. Now, inside here, when I execute this line of code, this animate with duration, that's going to immediately change the location of the label. Again, it's just going to take 4 seconds for the end user to see it. So let's add a label here. Okay, favorite label. Some people are probably thinking it's probably hardwired for CS193P. Okay, so here it is. So now I'm just going to tap it, and you can see that it's moving. And it also uses the kind of ease in, speeds up a little bit, and eases out, right? So I can tap it again. Now what if I tap it while it's moving? Okay, so let's see what happens here. Okay, tap it, starts moving. It's not doing anything. It's not tapping on it, okay? Right? So to do that, well, actually we're going to out of time. I'll do that in the code, but this is where we want to do the thing, begins from previous animation, okay? Okay, it interrupts it. Now, what am I going to do on Thursday? I'm going to think about it tonight. I might show you a more sophisticated animation, which is to have, this is a kitchen sink, right? So I'm going to have all labels, after a couple seconds, start spinning down the drain and disappearing, okay? So that turns out to be surprisingly easy, but it's more sophisticated than this animation right here, okay? But it's a great way to show how to chain animations, multiple animations, etc. And then we'll definitely do on Thursday is I'll show you NS timer, okay? So maybe I'll combine the two and we'll have the timer basically every second or two. It'll wake up and put anything down the drain that's not already on its way down the drain, okay? That'll be a fun combo. So that's it. I'm here today. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll see you on Thursday.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.